One, we have a couple of very special guests. Many of you are very familiar with Jason Cousins, our dear friend for many, many years. We have had scores of tastings, Brooklady, Mount Geram, you name it, Westland Distillery, and quite a few others, I believe. And we are very happy to welcome Tyler Pederson from Westland Distillery. And I'm going to let you take over as far as tell us about yourself, your little background with Westland, and let's go from there so that people can hear from you, because we'd love to have you come for a formal tasting with our customers down the road.
Excellent.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you, Bikram. And thanks for having us here. We really appreciate it. So I'm Tyler Pederson. I've been with Westland Distillery for 10 years now, now the distillery manager, and really focusing on developing the supply chains and optimizing the spirit production for the whiskey that's going into the cask. We've also got Shane Armstrong, who's our master blender. He's been with us for about 11 years. And then also kind of winging the production team is Scott Sell, who's our rack house manager and runs the farm. So there's three of us that are kind of deeply involved in the production side, and we're really happy to share American Single Malt with you, which is, as you're well familiar, and many of you are too, it's a really growing category. One that's actually been produced in the country for decades now. We've been doing it since 2010 and really leading the charge in the creation of the single malt category in America. So in 2016, we banded with 7 other distilleries to formally create the definition for what we proposed to the TTB, and we hope to have them soon ratify those definitions. And there's now over 200 of us in the commission making American single malt whiskey. So
200 distilleries in the United States of America making American single malt.
That's right.
That all agree to the same rules.
That's amazing. I mean, I don't think there are that many distilleries in Scotland.
No.
Ireland has about 50, 55, and that's stunning.
Yeah.
That's stunning. I mean, just within a few years. Are these localized? Certain areas are having more single malt distilleries, or are they spread out all over the U.S.?
Great question. No, they are certainly spread out all over the U.S. We've gotten a lot. You're starting to see also regional identities develop within these distilleries across the country. So you've got a lot of us in the Pacific Northwest, drawing upon the cultural influence of the brewing industry that is pretty prominent there. You've got our friends in the Southwest that are starting to explore smoking their whiskeys with scrub oak and mesquite. Colorado is blowing up because that's also a great barley growing state and rich brewing history, right? And then we've got distilleries up and down the East Coast too that are getting into the game and starting to make single malt. And so yeah, it's a really exciting time. And for Westland, it's all about making a whiskey with a sense of place, right? And in the Pacific Northwest, in Washington in particular, it's one of the best barley growing regions in the world. On the same rough latitude as Scotland, and so we see a really nice kind of maritime climate that's nice and gentle, but really favors awesome barley production. So when we started to look into making whiskey over 10 years ago, we looked at our raw materials and what was available. And rye is actually classified as a noxious weed in many counties, so you can't grow it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Is that right?
We grow a little bit of corn, but it's sweet corn. It's not that number 2 dent. We don't grow it very well.
Yeah.
So malted barley was the raw material that just made the most sense for us.
Right.
And so drawing upon that kind of cultural influence, we've released our kind of flagship whiskey and all of our whiskeys feature a Belgian Saison brewer's yeast, which is kind of wildly unique in the world of single malt production, but allows us to really highlight some interesting esters and some lovely phenolics that kind of really enrich the spirit that we make. Predominantly what's in your flagship whiskey there is our 5 malt grain bill, featuring barley varieties that are roasted and killed at different levels. And you really get a rich multi backbone out of that spirit.
So that's not very common, is it? Most people don't really pay that much attention, even in Scotland, I don't think, to the amount of roasting. They have one type of barley, and they might have 8, 9, 10, 20 different expressions based on what they put on the shelf, sherry cask, casking, peated, unpeated. But malting or roasting level is not really that prominent in other parts of the world, right?
That's right, yeah. It's highly unusual to do anything beyond a simple pale malt, which provides you some really nice biscuity kind of notes after fermentation. But that pale malt just has a lot of yield to it. All of the starches are left intact after the kilning process, so those can be broken down into sugars and then lead to a higher alcohol fermentation.
Right.
You do have some, like the Glenmorangie Signet, that has experimented with a little bit of chocolate malt. And this is just a further look at that concept in depth, that are really building up the flavor profile from the ground up and seeing what kind of flavor possibilities are really available to us.
So Tyler, what are the pros and cons? There got to be some cons of doing something like this, because otherwise somebody else will be doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what are some of the benefits you see in going with that kind of style?
Yeah.
Because you pretty much started right when this distillery started, right?
Absolutely.
2013 maybe.
Yeah, 2013 is when we opened up to the public with a 2-year-old whiskey in the bottle, and we had done a lot of trial and development with different mash bills, and you certainly see less yield when you're including a portion of roasted or kiln barleys, just because those starches have been degraded and they're not going to be able to be broken down into the simple sugars that yeast will convert. And you also have to be mindful in distillation, because some of those flavors, if you add too much chocolate malt, for instance, it's just going to carry over and predominate the palate profile, and it can even create a little bit of a bitterness to it.
Acrid.
A little acrid character.
Yeah.
With too much things like Munich malts, you get this kind of stewy sweetness to the spirit that is kind of unpleasant. So you have to mind your cuts and figure out how you're gonna, thread that needle. So you get a really nice malt forward flavor, but you're not getting kind of an out of balance spirit character.
I see. Okay. So barley, we talked about some of the best barley growing region in the world is Northwest U.S. And then the other key, when you talk about Kentucky bourbon and whiskey and things like that, they're talking about the water. So is there any particular characteristics that stand out in the Northwest in that front too, or?
Yeah, absolutely, and great question. So, as many people know, like Pacific Northwest and Seattle is known for its rain. Right?
Yeah.
So,
well, pretty soon Boston is going to be known for its rain too.
Absolutely.
What, 22 inches of rain this year, something along those lines.
Goodness. And for us, we source from the watershed that feeds into the city of Seattle is called the Cedar River watershed, and it's been protected from recreation and logging and all those other industrial applications since about like 1910 or something. So it's had a long time to be kind of unintruded by human interaction, and it's really interesting because it's got a really steep kind of valley, mountain slopes that are around this watershed, but it's not incredibly steep, so that when there's a lot of heavy rainfall, it doesn't kick up a lot of sediment into the water supply. So it needs pretty minimal filtration in terms of things like sediment. Water quality is great. We've got our calcium and magnesium and other kind of micronutrient or other particulate matters are right in the right space for brewing, and so we don't need to adjust our mashing waters at all. We can just add it straight into the mash tun.
A couple of things, and I think everybody talks about water, and basically you're getting the minerals. I think that's what you're looking at, right? Clean water, but at the same time minerals. You mentioned calcium and magnesium, right? Two of the salts. Is there too much of something, or what would that lead to whiskey? Or if you have iron, I know that leads to bitterness. I believe, right? What does calcium and magnesium add or deduct if they're not there?
Right. Yeah. Certainly, if you have too much of those components, you can stunt the growth of. Well, basically, you're going to push the enzymatic activity out of its kind of desirable range, and you're not going to get as an efficient extraction of your starches or efficient breakdown of your starches into sugars. And then you might have also sluggish fermentations. They're not going to start as quickly and as vigorously as you want. So you're going to end up with something that, if you're only distilling that fermentation tank based on the number of days, then you're going to get to something that has less yield and probably hasn't developed as many flavors and ester characteristics. Or you might have, if it's a sluggish fermentation, lactobacillus is going to get a better chance at growing, and you're going to get more of those lactic acid bacteria notes from it, and it can be undesirable.
For some people.
Yeah, for some people.
Other people love it.
Yeah.
I love that, what's it called, butyric acid, a little bit of it. Just a little bit, just a hint of it,
Absolutely.
But that's amazing. So the other thing, two of my favorite distilleries in the world. One is Springbank out in Campbelltown. The other one is Amrut in India.
Yeah.
Very, very different parts of the world. The Angel share in Campbelltown is about 2 to 3%. In India, in Bangalore, is about 10%. So after 10 years, you have about this much left in the barrel. So there's, what about Seattle or Washington State? What sort of environment are the casks sitting?
So for us, we've got about 7,600 barrels in maturation right now, between 3 rack houses. And those sit in an area of Washington called Skagit Valley, which is north of Seattle. The kind of North Puget Sound is really, really close to this area. So the rainfall is pretty heavy throughout the year, as we're known for. But the climate or the temperature swings that you see throughout the day and throughout the year are pretty minimal because they're tempered by that coastal water. So it's a really nice, gentle maturation cycle for our whiskey, and you're not seeing a lot of expansion and contraction, and because it's so humid, there's so much water in the air, right? We see evaporation of ethanol over the time. So we actually drop about a proof point per year. And roughly see about 2% evaporation on a yearly basis.
So very similar, more similar to Scotland than India, obviously. And it's very, very even keel, maybe slightly higher temperature than Scotland, maybe.
Yeah, possibly. Certainly during our summers, we have a nice long drought period from about the beginning of July almost to the end of September. Don't tell anybody it's nice in Seattle in the summertime. We would like to keep that a secret. But yeah, it's I think generally just a little bit warmer in the summer, but overall pretty similar.
Right. So the question about dropping 1%, what's your barrel entry proof, or do you play around with that?
Yeah. So we've got it pretty defined at this point. If we're entering into new American oak cask, that's going to be at about 110 proof.
110, so it's slightly lower than what the industry average is, 125, I believe, right?
Yeah. For all of our ex-bourbon casks, refilled Westland casks, or refill sherry, that's going to be at 125 proof. Seeking that greater level of extraction and penetration into the cask. But yeah, for the new American oak, that is, so full of tannins and everything else that we favor the lower entry proof for that.
You do, okay. So what will that do? So let's say we put at 140% alcohol into the not alcohol proof. What would that do if it's a new American oak as far as the taste profile?
Yeah.
As opposed to 110.
So at a lower proof, you actually extract a little bit more tannins, but the sugar profile kind of sinks through nicely. At a higher proof, you're going to be able to penetrate deeper into the cask, and for us, it's predominantly a heavy toast and a lighter char. But when we use that lighter char and heavy toast, you get a deeper penetration to the kind of aromatics on the other side. So it's really, I mean, we find that higher ethanol into the cask, it doesn't develop in the same way. I think the translation of the organic acids in combination with the alcohol isn't really estrifying in the same way we would like it to.
So you like the balance and the taste profile that comes out of a lower ABV entry proof. Well, we can spend a lot of time. I know that there are a lot of questions that people will have just in this 5 or 10 minutes that we had this discussion, but you also, I think you always had a barrel program since the very start. I remember Matt Hoffman was here, like you said, 2014, 15, and we really got into the entire processes and things like that. He said, I'll send you some barrel samples. He sent me about 50 back in the day. And that is not the situation right now. But tell us a little bit about your barrel program and as to how it's rolling out, because this probably is the best time for American single malt in the sense that the new rules, TTB stands for what?
The Tobacco and Tax Trade Bureau. But somewhat, I forget when they started the ATF. If you're illicitly distilling, they're going to visit you. But if you want to pay taxes, it's the Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. But they also added a little A in there.
Somehow
silent A.
Silent A.
So yeah, they're the ones that are regulating this. But our single cask program is really, really interesting because in the exploration of this Calere series, which is to cultivate, and we're really looking at identifying flavor impacts from barley varieties and terroir projects. We've distilled 30 unique barley varieties to date. It's just an incredible amount of raw materials that we've been able to examine and explore, and we've also got 65 different cask types in the rack house. So when you combine those two, and those 30 varieties are all distilled as a 100% pale malt mash bill. But we've also got our 5 malt mash bill and our peated mash bills, and then sometimes we'll take these new varieties and the second or third year we will distill them. We'll add some kilning to them.
Okay.
So we have just an incredibly wide spectrum of base spirit and then
Yeah.
cask in which to finish and marry in.
Incredible patina to play with. You know, you can modify here quite a few things here and there. As you were talking, and you know, one of the other things in Scotch, especially, not so much in Indian whiskey, just because of the angel share. A very common question for many consumers is that I'll try that 35-year-old Benromach, but if you're losing 1% a year and your entry proof is 55, so 15 years is the max for Westland, and then it's going to be 39.
Right. Yeah. We'll see.
New oak, maybe.
Yeah. There's been a couple of times where we've opened up a cask and it was like at like 100 proof, and we're like, oh my god, that's really dropped considerably.
Right.
So yeah, we'll see, and I think we'll see where the limit is.
Yeah, and probably it's not a linear.
No, it's not
2%,
linear.
and you know, things like that. But listen, it's been absolutely fun. Thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Yeah.
We wish that everybody else can join us in a future tasting, whether with Jason Cousin and also with Tyler. Hopefully we'll do a dinner later on this year and go from there. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.